ชื่อโปรแกรมแปลกว่ะเดี๋ยววงกลสัตว์โอ้เหี้ย
data objects that took you forever to perfect. Storing and deconstructing them can be complex and drain productivity. With MongoDB's native document data model, your objects are stored just as they're structured. With the right building blocks, MongoDB Atlas simplifies storing your data in the cloud, so you can solve bigger problems. Try a free cluster today.
So before we start this course here, I just want to mention that this is going to be a beginner-friendly course. At least here in the beginning, it will be a little bit beginner-friendly for people who are new to PHP, since I know from experience back many years ago when I was learning PHP, that PHP can be difficult for some people when they get started learning PHP for the first time. PHP is considered one of the easier languages to learn when it comes to programming languages, but again, it's relative to where you are at the moment. So if you already know a programming language beforehand, then PHP is going to be quite easy for you to learn. But if you don't know any programming languages, it will be a tough climb, at least in the beginning, until you get into the concept of how exactly does PHP actually work. So just to mention that this is going to be beginner friendly in the beginning, and then we're going to slowly start climbing up the ladder and make it a little bit more advanced as we go on. Now I should probably also mention that there's 2 courses on my channel that teaches PHP. This one right here is the one you should start with if you don't know anything about PHP up until now. So this is going to be what is called procedural PHP. Then the other course is going to be what is called object-oriented PHP. So if you know PHP beforehand and you want to learn object-oriented PHP, then you should probably jump over to the other course, which I will leave a link for in the description if you want to check that one out. So to begin with here, let's actually start talking about what exactly PHP is and what you can use it for. Websites, because if you haven't learned PHP before, then you might have some questions about it, and that's what I'm going to try to answer in this video here before we start moving on to actually learning PHP. Now, I should mention that we will also learn how to install a server on a local machine in this video here, so if you don't know how to do that, you should probably not skip this video, at least jump to the end of the video where I do actually show you how to do that. So that is required in order to install PHP. So PHP stands for PHP Hypertext Preprocessor. And what PHP is a scripting language that runs on the server side rather than on the client side, which you might be used to if you come from a JavaScript background, or if you come from HTML and CSS. All of that gets run on the client side. PHP, however, on the server side means it runs on the server, not on your local computer. PHP is also what is considered a loose language, and it's also one of the easier languages to learn if you want to learn programming. And I just want to point out the fact that it's called a loose language because when it comes to PHP, it is also one of those languages that you can actually write and run inside your website, and even though it's really bad code, it can still work. And because of this, PHP has gotten sort of a bad movement when it comes to is PHP good to learn? Because a lot of the more advanced developers out there look down PHP in a lot of cases, because PHP is so easy to jump into as a new developer that developers start to produce PHP code for websites early on when they just start learning PHP, and therefore there might be a lot of lag in the formatting of the PHP, or there might be lack of security when it comes to PHP. And that's why it's so important when you jump into learning PHP that you go in with the mindset that you want to learn how to program proper PHP and not just learn a little bit of PHP so you can create like a quick login system or something. You need to actually learn the fundamentals of PHP, otherwise your PHP code will be lacking when it comes to certain etiquettes when it comes to producing proper code. But with all that said, as long as you jump into these lessons here and just have the mindset that you want to learn PHP in the proper way, you should be fine. Now you might still have some questions about what exactly can PHP do when it comes to websites, because I'm talking about PHP being on the server side, JavaScript being on the client side. What exactly does all that mean? And what all this means is simply that if you want your website to remember certain information, then you can use databases to store data that users might submit to a website, such as a login system, or you can perform server-side operations, such as if you want to create a contact form inside a website. So just to name a few examples, there's a lot of different things that are quite powerful that you can use in PHP code that you can't use other languages for, or at least to a certain degree. Do bear in mind that PHP is a scripting language or server-side language that were built for website development, meaning that you will see that there's a lot of support when it comes to the website functionalities that you're trying to build using PHP code. So now the next question is, what exactly do you need to know in order to get started with this course here? Well, first of all, you need to know HTML. Second of all, there's nothing else you need to know. So if you know HTML, then you're pretty much good to go. You don't need to know JavaScript before you jump into this course. A lot of people recommend that you know JavaScript before this course here, because JavaScript and PHP have some similar syntax when it comes to the way you program it. A lot of programming languages do share similar syntax, so if you learn one programming language, it's going to be easier to learn another programming language. So just in general, it works the other way around as well. If you learn PHP, it would be easier to learn JavaScript. Hey, we do need another thing though, because like I mentioned, PHP is a server-side language. So that means that we can't just create a website like we would with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and simply run PHP inside that website. We have to have our website running on a server before PHP will actually work. That means that we have to install a local server on our computer, which isn't dangerous. It's not something that is complicated. It literally takes 1 minute to do. So it's fairly quick to set up. You don't need to be worried about anything. It pretty much works the first try for everyone. So it's not complicated. And just to mention it, because there might still be some confusion about why we need a local server, when you have a website and you develop it just using HTML and CSS, you have it on your computer locally without uploading it to the internet. You don't do that until the website is done, right? So therefore, if you want to develop PHP, it makes sense that we want to be able to develop on our computer before we upload it to the internet, right? So that's why we need to have a local server, and that's not something that's connected to the internet. It's just locally on your computer, meaning that you don't need to have internet, and you don't need to have an online website in order to develop on this website. So what we're going to do to start with here is you're going to go ahead and head over to apacheFriends.org, which is the website where you can download a software called Exam. Now there's a lot of different software out there when it comes to installing a server, and I do know that some Mac users like to use Mac in order to set up a local server, but just bear in mind that I've seen quite a few comments on my videos, and a lot of people who jump into my course with another server they installed, a lot of them tell me they have issues when it comes to connecting to a local server with that software they're using, which isn't the same as Exam. So if you want to make sure that you're following my tutorials exactly to the point, and that nothing is going to mess up when it comes to installing a server, I do recommend installing Exam, which is the one that I'm using throughout this series. So once you download and install Exam, you do need to remember where to install Exam, because afterwards you're going to have to get to the install location and go to a folder in order to set up our website or any sort of website you want to create in the future using Exam. So once you have it installed, let's go ahead to the install location and go inside the Exam folder that you created once you install it. Inside that folder, you'll see many different folders. You're just going to go ahead and delete those files you see in here, because those files are just files you into Exam. So once you load up the software, first time you enter the software, inside where you have your website, it's just going to load into Exam. So just going to get rid of those. These files are meant to be deleted after the first time you install Exam. So just get rid of them. Oops. And just a quick tip for you, I do recommend you save a shortcut for this folder, since you will be using this folder every single time you have to create a new website. So any website we create in the future, whenever you create a root folder for a website, you have to put them inside this folder called htdocs. So after deleting the files, let's actually go ahead and run the program. So if you were to go ahead and run the installation of Exam, if you don't have a shortcut after installing Exam, just go ahead and go back one directory and go ahead and click on this file that I show on the screen here, since that is going to be the control panel in order to open up Exam and start your server, so you can actually start using PHP. Inside the control panel, there's going to be two servers that you need to start every single time you start up Exam, because without these two servers, it's not going to be able to run the PHP inside your website. And the two servers you need to start here is the one called MySQL and the one called Apache. Now just a quick tip for you, in the future, to make this a little bit faster, if you go to the config, you can actually set up Exam. It's just going to run those two servers immediately, so you don't just run them manually every single time. So it's just going to run those servers again. It's just much quicker. And again, just in case you have questions here about what exactly Xlink is, it is just a program you open up in order to serve the two servers that we need in order to be able to run our website using PHP code. So what you're going to do at the same time, you have to go inside and see your website. You have to make sure your website folder is inside the htdocs folder. That's the first thing. Then when you go to the website, you need to make sure you have Xlink open and those two servers running, because that's going to be a requirement to get the PHP running. Then once you've done that, the only thing we need to do to open up our website so it supports PHP is to make sure we type in localhost inside our browser. Then it's going to open up your server, or at least the htdocs folder on your server. And remember, this is the place where you have all the websites you might have inserted inside the htdocs folder. So from here, you'll be able to select the website you want to open, and then it's just going to open up the website. And just to point this out, because I know that people have issues with this, if you want to open up your website inside the browser, don't go inside your root folder, right click on the file and open it inside your browser. Don't do that, because it's not going to work. You have to go inside the browser, type in localhost and open the website from there. Otherwise PHP is not going to work. So with all that said, this is how we install a local server on our computer so we can actually run PHP. And this is also how we open up our website inside the browser when we want to actually see the website. So in the next video we're going to talk about syntax for PHP and how we open up our PHP document when we want to get into PHP. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you in the next So now we can finally get started on our first PHP lesson when it comes to actually creating PHP code. So in the last episode we should have learned how to set up a server on your computer. Setting up the steps, so that's the last episode. You don't have to set up a local server. Just go ahead and watch that last episode. It's the last part of the video what we're going to do. What we're going to talk about today is syntax when it comes to PHP. Set up PHP documents so we can start developing using PHP. So as you can see behind me here, set up in the last episode. I just went and created this video, called this something very simple, and this is going to be where all the website files that we're going to be creating for this website is going to be inserted into. Again, I'm not going to insult your intelligence by saying that you don't want to set up a folder, but I just think it's worth mentioning. So we have this root folder, and once we go into it, this is where we're going to insert our index page, of course, because that's what you're used to when it comes to HTML and CSS. Something that I do get a lot of questions about, which is that when we create PHP inside a website, when we create our index page or any other page inside the website, we're used to writing index.html. Now when it comes to PHP code, this is not how we do it, because all you've learned about extensions when it comes to creating HTML documents is going to teach a little bit now. Whenever you want to include PHP inside a website, all your documents that would previously be a .html page extension are going to be called .php instead. And now you might start freaking out. What exactly does that mean? Well, it doesn't change anything other than the fact that right now we can actually run PHP inside our documents. So that's the only thing that you have to worry about anything like HTML not working anymore, CSS not working anymore. Everything is going to be the same. You can insert HTML and CSS inside PHP files as well. Don't worry. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up our text editor. I'm going to be using Atom in this case here. This is the one that I'm usually using when it comes to teaching inside these courses here. So what we're going to do inside Atom is we're just going to create a new page that is going to be called index.php. I'm going to save this one inside the root folder we just created. So once we've done that, we're just going to set up the basic, the basic layout that we need to have for a basic website, just like we would with a HTML website. And in here, we're going to start talking about setting up PHP, or at least the PHP syntax. So the first thing is to know when it comes to PHP is that when we want to create PHP inside a document like this one, whenever you want to create PHP, you have to wrap the PHP inside a pair of PHP tags. This means that we have to write lesser than, question mark, PHP, that's the opening tag, and then at the end, question mark, greater than. And everything that goes in between these two tags is going to be PHP. It is also worth noting that if you create any sort of pages inside your website that is going to be pure PHP, meaning that this document is then you should not have a closing tag at the end. It doesn't really make that big of a difference, but there is one thing that you should keep in mind, which is that if you have a pure PHP document and you have the closing tag at the end, and you leave one space after the closing tag, it can screw up your website. So it's important to leave it up to make sure that we don't run into that issue of white space after the closing tag. So make sure you just have the opening tag inside pure PHP pages. And when I say pure PHP pages, I mean pages that doesn't have HTML, CSS, or that sort of thing inside of it. Just PHP. So with that said, let's actually go and start creating our first PHP code. What we're going to do first here, which is going to be pretty much the only thing we're going to really talk about today when it comes to code in PHP, is we're going to learn how to write or output something inside the browser. Now there's a couple of different ways to do this. My preferred way is the one called Echo. I will go and leave a couple of different links in the description for the other ways you can also output data inside, or at least basic data inside the browser. But we're just going to primarily be focusing on Echo in these lessons here. So even though we have something called print and so on, this is the one that we're going to be using. So what we're going to write inside our PHP tags is going to be echo, E-C-H-O, space. Then we're going to create what is called a string. We'll get to talk about data types in, I believe, the next lesson or something. It will be coming up, so don't worry, we'll talk about data types. But for now, just know that a string is a series of characters. So what we can do using a script is we can create words, we can create sentences. So when we echo, we're just going to write double quotes, and inside the double quotes, we're going to go ahead and write hello world, which is sort of a tradition when it comes to learning programming, that you write hello world. So that's the one we're just going to go ahead and create here. So once we've created this code, this statement here, we're going to go ahead and end it off with a semicolon at the end. And that's something you have to do whenever it comes to writing any sort of statements inside PHP. You have to make sure you end it off with a semicolon. And this is just simply to tell PHP that we're going to go to the next statement. So it's just something that you have to make a habit of doing. And I do actually see a lot of people that make errors. They get some kind of error message inside their web page, and then they comment it on my videos and ask, why am I getting a unexpected something, something? It's because you're missing a semicolon probably. So make sure you always end up your sentences or statements using semicolon. And now you might have some questions when it comes to including PHP together with HTML inside our pages here. So let's go ahead and create a little bit of HTML. We're just going to create two paragraphs, and then we're going to go and insert a bit of PHP in between those paragraphs. So as you can see here, we have a paragraph at the top. This is a paragraph. Then we have a simple open and closing tag with PHP. And then we simply this is also a semicolon. And then we're just going to go ahead and write a paragraph underneath it. Now, it is important to also mention that if it is the last line of code or the last statement you have inside your PHP tags, we technically don't need to have a semicolon at the end, but just make it a habit to do so either way, because it's not hurting anything to have a semicolon at the end. Just go ahead and do it. And now what we're doing here is actually called escaping PHP from HTML, which means that we're simply separating PHP and HTML from each other in order to produce a much more clean look to our code inside the documents here. You could, if you wanted to, echo out HTML markup if you wanted to. So if you wanted to echo let's say a paragraph, you can actually include the paragraph tags inside the echo. It will get noticed as regular HTML when it gets output inside the browser. But in a lot of cases, just to make code cleaner and to make the markup cleaner, it is better to separate the two to make PHP one thing and HTML another thing. And just to show off a little bit more advanced example here, now don't worry about the code that you're seeing. If you don't understand it, we'll get to talk about it. But there is some more advanced examples when it comes to escaping PHP from HTML that I have not done a habit of doing in the past, but it's something that really helps doing, at least when it comes to writing code or writing markup inside your documents, since the editor that we're sitting inside of has a lot easier time when it comes to writing shortcuts and stuff for our HTML inside the editor using tab, for example, if we're just writing HTML markup. But if we were to write HTML inside the PHP tags or inside a PHP string, then we can't use tab as shortcut and that sort of thing. So just try and separate it as much as possible, like I did here. Now in this example here, just to explain it, because we're not going to get too deep into it because it's not something we learned yet, but at the top here you can actually see that we have a if statement or a if condition, which is going to be opening and closing, because usually when we make these conditions we have a opening parameter, then we have a pair of curly brackets which is going to contain a bunch of PHP code in between the brackets. And as you can see at the end here, I also went ahead and wrapped the ending bracket inside PHP tags. And again, like I said, don't worry too much about this code up here. We will get to talk about that in the future. And the last thing we're going to talk about is how to comment when it comes to PHP. Because when you write PHP or HTML or CSS, you can separate anything within the markup. It's a good idea to leave out comments, because if you were to return to our code in about, let's say, 3 months' time, then you're going to get very confused if you don't remember what the code does. So make sure to leave comments. It will be a lot easier for you in the future. So just go ahead and make it a habit to leave in comments once in a while. But besides that, that's the syntax once in this episode here. It's pretty much all you need to know in order to get started with PHP. So in the next episode, we're going to talk about scalar types, which is actually a specific data type that we have inside PHP. There's a lot of data types when it comes to PHP. The ones we need to worry about for now here at the beginning is the one called scalar types. We will get more into those in the next episode, so I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you in the next Today you're going to learn how to make a login system completely from scratch. And before we get into this episode, it's very important that you listen to this short introduction here, because we're going to talk about how we're going to make this login system, because there is many different ways you can make a login system. So I'm going to explain specifically which way we're going to do it in this episode. What we're going to do in this episode is we're going to create a basic login system using procedural programming, not object programming. This guide is also going to be a beginner's guide, meaning that if you haven't done a lot of PHP before, this is going to be a very easy to understand guide where I'm going to explain everything from scratch, so you don't have any sort of questions when it comes to the PHP code or how to make the login system when we do actually program it in this episode here. After this episode, I'm also going to upload other episodes that are going to continue on this login system here. For example, how to create a forgotten password system, or how to create a profile page for the users in this website we're building here. So I'm going to have other episodes that I'm going to upload to my channel, and I will go ahead and leave a link in the description once I actually have those episodes ready, so you can just go ahead and find them in the description of this video here. Now, in case you already know a bit about connecting to databases using PHP, I do have some additional info that you need to know before we get into this episode. Now, if you're completely new at creating PHP code, just go and ignore this next part, because it's only going to confuse you even more, and it's not something you need to think about right now until you get a little bit better with PHP. We will be using MySQLi in order to connect to our database in this lesson here. Do bear in mind, MySQLi is not the same thing as MySQL. MySQL was outdated 3 years ago. MySQLi